So Wabi Sabi and Hygge and Biophilic Design, they all focus on how we feel in a space, you know, calm or stressed or focused or cozy. Wabi Sabi is an ancient life philosophy rooted in Zen Buddhism, and it celebrates natural beauty, flaws and all. Loosely translated, Wabi means simplicity and Sabi means the beauty of age and wear. And it encourages us to focus on seeing things in their most authentic and probable imperfect state. This is called Yukitamo. So it celebrates things the way they are rather than endlessly pursuing perfection. And you might be familiar with Kenzugi. It's an ancient form of art, and it's where you mend broken objects with a kind of golden filling, giving them these things called golden scars. And Kenzugi reminds us that there's a great beauty in broken things because the scars tell a story. So think rough edges, asymmetry, textured fabrics, natural weaves, and natural materials. Danish Hygge is also often described as the art of coziness. And its key ingredients are togetherness, relaxation, indulgence, presence, and comfort. And in other words, you know Hygge when you feel it, and it's inherently soothing. It was a big movement in around 2016, 2017, but it still lingers today. And during times of upheaval, especially now with the coronavirus, when both public and personal perceptions of safety and community are at risk, it's common to yearn for some Hygge. So think candles, blankets, rugs, hot cocoa. And so therefore, bringing a little Wabi Sabi and a little Hygge into your designs can also add to the overall restorative effect that a space might have. So another tool to consider is nudge or neuroarchitecture design. And this is all about how the environment impacts on decision-making and how design can help take the effort out of making good decisions and thus support healthy habits. So the brain is making micro decisions all day long. Decision fatigue leads us to making poor decisions or taking the easier option. And a 15-second delay is sometimes enough to deter a bad decision. So nudge design considers placing things where they are needed to make the better decisions easier. So clutter triggers decision fatigue and impacts stress levels. So reducing the amount of clutter you're surrounded by is one of the easiest ways of easing the decision-making process. You waste valuable brain power every time you see items that need to be put away. Poor nourishment. This can lead to poor health or diabetes and obesity. So a wellness kitchen in your home or the office, you would look at placing healthier food options at eye level. And you might separate foods that energize, like fruit and veg, to foods that tire, like sugary foods. You might put them out of reach. You could build in hydroponic systems or a place to grow edible plants and herbs. You might look at portion control, which is a big thing in the well building standard, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. They like a small size plate, 25 centimeter diameter, to manage portion control. So you could build the storage units for plates narrower so that they only fit a 25 centimeter plate, and so on. And then movement. So active design, we look at that now in a few slides, but cognitive impairment affects around 1 in 14 people over the age of 65. And this includes dementia and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And some key factors for cognitive decline include socialization, you know, what you've done in the past and how much socialization you have now, your activity in the past and what sort of activity levels you have now, and your diet, obviously, you know, what you've eaten up to now and what you are eating. But what's really interesting or maybe worrying is that signs that the brain is changing can be picked up 30 years in advance of the onset of symptoms. So if you're designing homes for people in their 40s and 50s, you might need to consider how you will design spaces which will encourage socialization now and into the future, how you might design a wellness kitchen, and how you might incorporate movement and exercise opportunities into their everyday lives. So for example, locating walking shoes, the dog lead, raincoat, etc. at the door. So active design is, as I said, I'm going to be talking about it in a few slides now coming up. Okay. Clutter, right. So as I mentioned before, clutter triggers decision fatigue, and decision fatigue leads to us making poor decisions or taking the easier option. So here is some interesting research. There's a 2014 study on the link between hoarding and various psychiatric conditions, including obesity, which revealed that cluttered spaces had an impact on the decision-making process to eat or not to eat. And an outstanding 77% of people with highly cluttered homes were more likely to be overweight. A study at the University of Minnesota in 2013 showed that relative to participants in a disorderly room, participants in an orderly room chose healthier snacks, And a study in 2010 at UCLA discovered that women living with stressful or cluttered homes had increased depressed mood over the course of the day, whereas women with restorative homes had decreased depressed mood over the day. And they also reported that women who had issues with clutter had the signature pattern of cortisol that was associated with people who had chronic fatigue, post-traumatic stress disorder, and had a higher risk of mortality. Not all bad though. People in cluttered spaces have been shown to act in a more creative way also. So it's about how we manage clutter. Where do we put it? Active design. So I mentioned active design earlier on. So this focuses on providing opportunities for regular movement. Okay, and this is a far out version. This is Biophilic House in East Hampton in New York, and it's designed by Japanese architects Arakawa and Gins in 2008. And they endeavored to create buildings through which people would learn not to die. They firmly believed that architecture that created movement, imbalance, and that messed with perception would have an impact on the immune system and would eventually stop aging and death. They are, however, both dead, but they were onto something. Sitting is considered the new smoking. And so creating opportunities for activity in the home or the office or school or care environments should always be considered. And this might include creating a home or an office gym, having bike racks and shower facilities, variable seating heights, active furnishing, stand-up electric desks, bike desks, creating what I call an inconvenient home, which is we've been trained for years that the home should be and our spaces should be really, really convenient. Perhaps we should review that. Maybe the laundry should be upstairs, you're running up and down the stairs, you're getting some extra steps during the day. You might want to locate printers away from desks and so on. So active design is one of the concepts of the well building standard under the concept of movement. And we're going to touch on that briefly now later on. So IAQ. Another concept of the well building standard is the air concept. And this relates to IAQ, which is interior air quality. And VOCs are toxins released into the air by a process called off-gassing. And VOCs, which stands for volatile organic compound. The levels of these can be 5 times higher indoors than outdoors. Off-gassing is guessed to continue for approximately 5 years. However, there have been other studies that think that off-gassing will continue for 15 years or more. And off-gassing is when the chemicals in a product change into gas and release into the air when the space heats up. So you've just painted a property and then you turn on the heating. That's when you've got a ton of VOCs coming out. Common VOCs are in paint, in glues, in timber veneer products, in flooring and furniture, and so on. And the most common one is formaldehyde, and there's buckets of this in MDF. So what happens is some people are very sensitive, and they'll generally notice their symptoms, which can be headaches, dry and irritated eyes, nose, throat, itchiness, fatigue, sinus infections, nausea, after about several hours if they're in a space where VOCs are off-gassing. And they often feel better when they get away from the building. But for most people, poor IAQ doesn't affect us right away. And it's the buildup of these dangerous levels in our system that can accumulate over our lifetime. And lifetime exposure can lead to cancers, respiratory illnesses, and so on. But another thing to note about VOCs is that children are most at risk because their defenses are not fully developed, and they crawl around on the floors when they're little. When they come in contact with the settling VOCs, it's kind of got onto the dust and it's floating down, so they ingest it or they breathe it in. And this is bad because there's a concept called the first 1,000 days. You can read about it. UNICEF does a piece on this. And this is basically the first 2 years of a child's development from in utero to when they're about 2 years of age. And this is when the brain begins to grow and develop and the foundations for their lifelong health is built. So in other words, what happens to them and what they come in contact with in these first 1,000 days can impact on how likely they are to develop cancer or heart disease or diabetes or obesity at some stage in their future. So to put all of this into context, we can relate to bottled water. So we drink approximately 4.5 pounds of water each day in all forms. That's in food and drink and so on. And we breathe in 45 pounds of air inside each day, 10 times that. And nut allergy sufferers, this afflicts about 1 in 100 people. And these are accommodated all around the world with food labeling, nut-free schools and businesses. It's taken very seriously. But IAQ warnings, on the other hand, are not available at this time and impact the same amount of people, 1 in 100. Professional decorators are 40% more likely to contract lung cancer. Now, obviously, things are improving in many areas where we have most of the paint companies have brought out lower or zero VOC paints and finishes. So there is a movement, but it is something we need to always be cognizant of what we're using to decorate our spaces. So IAQ is also very topical at the moment as we are learning to manage the spread of the coronavirus. So you've probably all heard about HEPA filters and CO2 monitors, but you may not have heard of relative humidity. Sorry, I need to get a glass of water. Right, so relative humidity. This measures the actual amount of moisture in the air as a percentage of the maximum amount of moisture that the air can hold. And in the well building standard, the air concept, we're told that we need to maintain the RH, the relative humidity, between 30 and 50% at all times for comfort. And the reason being, if it's too dry, occupants can experience dryness and irritation of their eyes and throat, their mucous membranes. But if it's too high, it allows for the growth of microbial pathogens such as bacteria and mold. You've seen black mold in damp houses, so that makes sense. And also can lead to off-gassing of the building materials or VOCs. So formaldehyde, for example, its off-gassing can be 1.8 to 2.6 times higher when relative humidity increases by 35%. So in terms of the coronavirus, when cold, dry air comes indoors and is warm, so you open the window, the relative humidity indoors can drop by 20%. And this drop makes it drier and makes the air drier, which makes it easier for the airborne viral particles to travel because they like dry air. And also the cilia, the hair-likey things up our noses and down our airways, they don't function very well in dry conditions and they can't expel the viral particles as well as they could normally. And there was a study in 2020 at Harvard, and they suggest that we should maintain our relative humidity at around 40 to 60%, and that this could slow down the spread of the coronavirus because the higher humidity enhances our ability to fight off infection. The coronavirus decays faster at closer to 60% relative humidity than at other levels. And as I mentioned earlier, if it's lower than that, the drier air makes it easier for greater numbers of the coronavirus particles to travel further and penetrate deeper into our lungs. So this brings us to the well building standard. So the well building standard is the world's first building standard focused exclusively on human health and wellness, and it provides benchmarks and guidelines for the design of buildings that promote the physical, emotional, and mental health of the inhabitants. Now, there are other well-known green building standards such as LEED and BREEAM, and these tend to be more carbon-centered though, and they focus more on the building's environmental performance. However, WELL and BREED and LEEM and also the other building standards such as the Living Building Challenge are aligned in some areas now, and they have recognized crosswalks between them, which means if you're submitting documentation for one, it can be recognized by the other standards, which saves time and money. So WELL has 10 concepts, which are split into features. There are 108 features, and it's a points-based measurement system. So projects pursuing WELL certification can achieve one of 4 certification levels: bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. And projects need to achieve all the preconditions set for each feature. So preconditions are a list of standards that must be met, and then they can earn a certain number of points towards additional points towards the different levels of certification through implementing features that are called optimizations. And these can be design or operational strategies. So in other words, you've got a number of preconditions, and then you have to get these extra points. So if you want to get bronze certification, you have to get an extra 40 points in your optimizations. If you want to get silver certification, you have to get an extra 50 points in your optimizations. For gold, it's an extra 60, and for platinum, it's another 80. So the 10 concepts are air. Well, the first one is air. So this talks about ventilation and filtration, operable windows, and ongoing monitoring of IAQ. Water is about providing safe and clean water and promoting water. So you can see the water cooler, and there might be signs around, stay hydrated, it's better for your mind. Nourishment, you have to be able to offer in the cafeterias wholesome foods, healthy portions. I mentioned earlier that the plate size, 25 centimeters diameter. they have to promote mindful eating and choices. Light, you'd be looking at putting in circadian lighting systems, organ optimizing the natural sunlight and managing glare. Movement is about, we talk about active design, integration of activity and movement into everyday activities and the commute, about using ergonomic workstations, about having incentive health programs. Thermal comfort, that's about zoned areas with thermal variability of around 3 degrees in different spaces. So if you're a person who likes to be cold when they're working, you could be in this space, but if you're somebody who's always cold, you might work over here, which is a warmer space. You have to manage the humidity levels. Sound is about minimizing background sound, using acoustic materials and sound masking systems. Materials is all about managing your VOC levels, having material transparency, which means you're providing labeling systems or folders showing, this is what we've used and this is what's good, this is the bad stuff that's in it. It's about managing pest control and cleaning protocols. And where do you store the cleaning equipment? Cleaning equipment's got tons of VOCs. So, do you lock it away? How do you manage that? The mind concept, this is where we talk about biophilic design, nature views, managing stress. And then final, the 10th concept is community. This is about health programs, it's about well-being, pro-family policies and support, sleep policies, occupancy service. So I'm just going to show you a little section of the mind concept because it's about biophilia. It might be the most interesting. So this is what you might look at. So you've got the precondition, which you have to get, M2, which is nature in place. And this is 2 parts which must be satisfied in the design. So precondition part 1 is you have to use natural materials, shapes, patterns, images, colors or sounds. And then you have to use one of either plants, potted plants or wall plants. And well, it says you have to use 1% of your floor area has to be potted plants, or if you're doing a plant wall, a green wall, it has to be 2% of the floor area or the largest available wall. If your project is over 100,000 square feet, you have to water in every floor or water feature in every floor, and it has to be 1.8 meters high by 4 meters square, and obviously nature views. Your precondition part, so you only have to do one of those, either plants, water or nature views. Precondition part 2 is about creating a connection to place. And this is about recognizing the local community or the environment through artwork or sculpture, installations or use of materials or type of plants and colors that represent the local environment as well as the local culture. For example, if you were building in the Gaeltacht area, you might use Ogham, the ancient Irish writing, as a starting point to develop your designs. So you have to satisfy the 2 preconditions of feature M2, and then you need to get your additional points for either bronze, silver, gold certification by doing as many optimizations that are realistic for projects. So in this case, by providing a restorative space, see optimization part 1, you can get an extra point. And this has to be 75 square feet, at least, with the choice of features such as dimmable lighting, natural sounds, thermal comfort, a choice of seating types and heights, nature incorporation, calming colors, textures and forms, and privacy. And you can then gain another point by providing a direct line of sight to indoor plants or a water feature or a nature view to 75% of all the workstations, or position all the workstations within 33 feet of planting, water, a water feature or a nature view. So how are we doing for time?